last we did was the 6th verse. Am I right? 6th verse, where we learned Lord Krishna says renunciation is hard to attain without yoga. A sage who is well established in yoga attains Brahman ere long. I think we have clarified quite a bit on this. Let's move on. Let's take up the 7th verse. Unless there are any clarifications you have from what has been said thus far. If you have any clarifications, you can feel free to ask. Verse 7. Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriyaha sarva bhutatma bhutatma kurvannapi na lipyate. Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriyaha sarva bhutatma bhutatma kurvannapi na lipyate. Yoga yukto vishuddhatma. He who is united by yoga, yoga yuktaha, vishuddhatma, who is purified, vijitatma, who has conquered the self, jita indriyaha, subdued his senses, who realizes his self as the self in all beings, sarva bhutatma bhutatma, kurvan napi, even though is acting, na lipyate, is not tainted. You can't get anything which is very simple as this and as profound as this message here. So this 7th verse is talking about a jnani. You remember a yogi, sannyasi and jnani. Just keep that in mind. Yogi is a beginner, sannyasi is a advanced seeker, jnani is a man of realization. So what is he describing him? How does he describe him? So a jnani, firstly he says vishuddhatma. There is no shuddhatma, who is purified. Purified means there is no impurities. Anything that is pure means the Atman. Anything other than Atman is impure. Even in our language, if there is anything other than anything by itself, for example, if I have if I have a sample or a little bit of gold, I can say it is pure gold, or it becomes impure gold. If anything other than gold is contained in it, it becomes impure. I can have a pure sample of silver or an impure sample of silver. Anything other than silver in silver makes silver impure, even though there could be gold in it, but still it becomes impure silver. Similarly, when he says vishuddhatma, means one who has purified himself, there is no impurities. When a jnani has realized his self, he has attained that state of himself. He knows himself. He has realized himself. He has cleansed himself. cleansed himself. He has separated himself from the impurities. So the impurities or the spiritual mala, the spiritual dirt, is known as the vasanas or the desires. So when Vishuddhatma, when one has cleansed his inner personality, there is no stain, there is no dirt. It refers to his causal body. Causal body is synonymous to vasanas. Why you call it the causal body? We have mentioned it before once or twice. Causal because it's the whole personality stems from the vasanas. So vasanas are known as the cause, like the seed is the cause of the tree. From the seed comes the tree. Similarly, a human being, a manifested being, emerges from an unmanifest vasana. So vasanas are unmanifest. So spiritual journey or spiritual growth is measured by the cleansing of the unmanifest dirt. The vasanas you do not know. Do I know what vasanas I have? Do you know what vasanas you have? They are unmanifest nature. But how do you know whether you have a vasana for anything or not? How do you know whether you have a vasana for it? How do you know to what extent have you conquered the vasana? How do you know to what extent you have cleansed your vasana? Is it possible to know? Subramaniam ji is profusely nodding his head saying no. Solunga sir, why do you think it is not possible to know whether you have a vasana for something? If you have, and since you have been working on yourself, to what extent have I conquered this vasana? Is it not possible to know?
No, it's very difficult to measure that. It's difficult to it goes into various fathoms. I mean, we don't know how to what extent it goes. What is the definition of that? What is the extent allowed
Of the vasana?
of the vasanas? Definition of the vasanas, and to what extent it is allowable or permissible.
No, from the spiritual point of view, no vasana is permissible.
Yeah, okay. That's right.
Nothing. Onume permissible illa, sir, because the definition of realization is God minus, man minus vasanas equals Atman. So if you and I want to get to Atman, we have to get rid of all our vasanas. So there's nothing as permissible and non-permissible.
Yes. Okay.
But the question we are observing is, how do I know to what extent have I cleansed myself? Because our whole journey is about cleansing my vasanas. If vasanas are impurities, sir, if I give you a brass vessel, it is tarnished because it's not been cleaned. You go apply some brasso or you use other cleaning materials and you scrub and scrub and scrub and you clean it. And then you come and show me, sir, I have cleansed removed the dirt. And I'll say, sir, I think you have done a good job, but I think there's little more dirt. I can foresee some more is hidden, sir. I think we can clean more. Can you put in more effort? See, there's a way you can measure, isn't it? Because you know the original state, which is, it's brilliant. Now, there must be a way we should know to measure our vasanas. If we do not know, we are all left in the dark. First of all, the vasanas themselves are in the dark. We do not even know whether you have a vasana for it or not. So how do you figure out that unknown vasana? There should be a way. That is my inquiry. Okay, so a few inputs have come. Ramanji says desires are indicative. Let's say if it doesn't manifest into desires, your vasanas can be dormant and yet you do not know about it. Then how? Hmm? Expose yourself to the marketplace. All right. I will get attracted to it unknowingly. It is certainly possible. Then I need to seek some knowledge from Annapurnama. She is very, very clear. Yes, Ma Solungo, how is it certainly possible to know which vasana you have, what extent you have?
Namaste, Guruji.
Namaskaram.
It is, we can see whether we are having, the measure of our vasanas by our actions. If we do our duties without desires, we can gauge that we have less of vasanas.
Gauge by, because the vasanas manifest themselves as desires. But sometimes the vasanas don't manifest. It's possible, is it not possible that the vasana is deep within, unmanifest?
Yeah, maybe we don't take initiative to seek satsang, and unfortunately we fall into dussang. Maybe with that, can we realize that we have the measure of our vasanas?
So are you recommending us to keep dussang also now?
No.
Oh, sorry, I didn't
if
get
we
you.
don't seek, our vasanas may prevent us from seeking satsang.
Okay. I get what you're saying. I'm just trying to, yeah, I get what you're saying. Okay. Yeah, Tinky Ma wants something to say. Yes, please, Ma.
Yeah, so how do we know what are vasanas? I think our actions show that. One is, of course, the deliberate actions, but sometimes in a given situation or in some circumstances, spontaneously, without much thought, we may, behave in a certain way, and that sometimes surprises us also. So that could be a dormant vasana which has now, given that appropriate situation, it has manifested. And sometimes it shocks us. It could be, a positive thing. I never knew I could do this. Or it could be, oh my God, I didn't even know that there is this negative thing in me. I think that could be one reason. And exactly how many vasanas we never know. But, through life, the things that maybe I could do at 20 and which I never thought I would ever be able to do. There were many things I never thought I would do. But as I grew older, I found that yes, I enjoy this or I can do this. Then those were the dormant vasanas, maybe given the right, I would say, prerna, boldo, motivation, right opportunity. I was able to do certain things. So then I realized, see, these vasanas are also there. Those desires were also there.
You're right. You're right. Very true. So it is by many a time it's not possible to actually know whether you have an inherent vasana in you all or not, because vasanas by themselves are a very subtle nature, and vasanas are in the seed form, they unmanifest. So it is only possible to get to know of them when they manifest as thought. So when and if at all any thought comes into your mind, that is when you know that something, it has a force from within which is pushing you out. So when the vasanas push themselves out or push you out into the world to contact a particular environment, or there's a thought of something, that's the way you know that there is a vasana. But until the thought comes, you will not know whether you have vasana for it or not. So how to know if you say you had a vasana for a certain thing? How do you know to what extent you had? Expose yourself to the marketplace. I think Rajima mentioned, when you expose yourself to the world of stimuli of things and beings, what would happen? The external world triggers the stimuli triggers your hidden vasanas. So even when stimuli has not triggered any vasana, or your reactions are measured, you know, okay, to a large extent, I have no interest in it, or to a certain extent, I have an interest, and this extent I have measured control, and so on and so forth. That's the only way you'll find out. So if you are in an environment where there is no stimuli, what do you develop? Harishji, if you are in an environment where there is no stimuli from the external world, can you tell me of an example of an environment where there is no stimuli or very minimal stimuli?
In meditation.
Oh, you've gone to that level, huh? Very, very high level, sir. In the Janmatala, if I meditate, I am blessed. Can you think of a little less relative?
When you immersed yourself in either bhakti or in karma, when nothing else matters. But even there's some stimulus, yes.
See, as I said, there is some stimuli, but there is much less stimuli than you're being in the marketplace. See, I said the only way you will know you have a vasana is expose yourself to the marketplace, isn't it?
So when you have surrendered, or when you have aligned yourself with a larger cause, or in karma or in bhakti, at that time you...
No, I don't think you are, I know where you're coming from, but the extreme opposite of being in the marketplace, opposite of that is you are in a protective environment, as Tinkima, I think Annapurnama said that satsang. Like when you're in a protective environment, let's say in an ashram, or in a place where everything is protected for you. There is no negative stimuli that is going to come and hurt your development. Everything is so cured and cultured and conducive and protected. There is no news from the world. There is no external visitations. The kind of food you eat is sattvic. The kind of music listen is sattvic. The kind of knowledge you get is sattvic. The people you meet are of the right kind of people. So everything, when it is conducive, what do you develop? You develop, okay, what do you develop when you are trying to measure your vasanas in a satsang? Do I have a vasana for movies? Let's say, example, you want to know, do I have vasana for watching movies? And you are measuring that vasana in a ashram environment. Now, what do you develop? Hariji, what do you develop when you measure your vasana for a movie in an ashram? What do you develop? 1 minute, ma. Annapurnama coming. Yes, sir?
I feel disgusted. I feel restless.
Ayyo. Enna, sir?
When I am in a ashram and when I am thinking of the movie.
No. You got the question wrong.
Yeah,
I'm saying, if let's say I had a vasana for movie before joining the ashram.
Yeah.
I have spent 2 years in an ashram.
Yeah.
End of that, after 1 year or so, I want to know how much have I conquered this vasana for movies. Now, that 1 year has passed, there was no opportunity, no television only in the ashram, forget movie.
Yeah.
So there is no opportunity. So after 1 year, you're actually measuring yourself, to what extent have I conquered this vasana for a movie? So if you are measuring yourself, to what extent I have got this vasana in the ashram, what would you develop?
How I like the atmosphere in the ashram.
And obviously, you're enjoying that 1 year stay in ashram. With reference to the movie of Vasana, what do you develop?
Detachment.
Ah, correct. You have developed detachment. I will leave that. Now, that detachment, is it 100% true or is it false detachment? How do you know? How do I truly know whether I truly risen from that vasana for a movie, or because there is no opportunity for me, therefore, arey yaar, what is a big deal in a movie? You're not interested. There is nothing conducive for a movie there, and nobody talks of a movie. You don't know which movies have released. You don't know what is happening. You have no news about it. So what's happening? There is no stimuli for a movie.
Yeah.
So what will happen? The vasana is it not possible. The vasana for movie is very much there,
Dormant.
but still deep dormant.
Yeah.
So how do I find out? You cannot find out whether you have a vasana by being in a protective
Ashram.
environment.
Yeah.
So if you want to know how spiritual you are, where should you go?
I must go to the city.
Correct. But don't get permanently settled in the city.
Yeah.
Huh?
Okay.
You should go once in a while.
Yeah,
Go out in the marketplace and find out how does your mind behave.
I should go to the city. I must be in touch with my friends.
Correct.
And to what extent they are able to influence on my thought.
Correct. And so you are, yes, Sitaramji, I'm coming 1 minute. So you would know whether you have a vasana only when you find yourself in the marketplace. Remember, that is the real acid test. How spiritual you are is not measured by being in the spiritual environment, by putting yourself in the most unconducive environment for yourself, which is conducive to the vasanas. If by being in an ashram, it's unconducive for my desire for a movie, I will not know. Be in the most conducive environment for the movie, and then still you say, it's okay, what's the big deal? If somebody wants to take you for a movie, you might go with him, but there is no drag, there's no drive, you're not drawn to it. You have a little inward dispassion, which was not the case 1 or 2 years prior. You have evolved. So he's only saying one who has completely cleaned the stain of vasanas. Many people have false vairagyam. This is what I'm trying to say. Many people who claim to have vairagyam, they have what is known as smashana vairagyam. This morning, in fact, I went on a bicycle ride with one of my friends, and he took me to a different route. And then we went into the deep village, and we passed by a huge crematorium. And my immediate comment to him was, "It's so peaceful here." Huh? I said, "It is indeed very peaceful there." So, and when you go and sit in the smashana vairagyam, when you go and spend some time in a smashanam, or when you come from a funeral, what is your mindset? What is life? What am I running behind? What am I acquiring? And at the end of the day, nothing I'm going to take with me. So what is the big deal? You will tell, look at that man, all his life he amassed, not a penny he parted with it. Now he's made a mess of it. I've known families, believe me, I know right now I can think of families where all their children and their daughters-in-laws are cursing their father and father-in-law because he has amassed enough wealth and made a mess with the wealth in terms of, in the will, he made a mess, and when now all the siblings and their daughters-in-law and that all are fighting. Artham, anartham, adha. So ensure that you don't have a false vairagyam. So therefore, a man of spirituality is always a man of action. You're always exposing yourself to action and measuring what is the state of your mind. So spirituality is measured with the state of your mind. Spirituality is not measured with the physical status where you are. I can be in the marketplace, I can be in the ashram, but the state of my mind determines how spiritual I am. So be very careful. Okay. I'm very concerned with Annapurnama. If she keeps on doing, she'll be continuously blessing us. So and she might develop yes, ma'am. So we seek your blessings.
I want some clarification,
Yes, ma'am.
Guruji.
Yes, please.
We are all born with vasanas, and since childhood, there were conducive environment, non-conducive environment. We are all exposed to everything, like all attractions, worldly attractions. But there has been a 30% of spirituality and 70% of worldly attractions. But as we progress, that worldly vasana, we exhaust the desires for vasanas, and now the status is 70% spirituality and only 30%. We don't attach any more importance to our sensual enjoyments, like.
Okay.
So it happens progressively, automatically.
No, it is the only way we can answer that question is spiritual age has nothing to do with the physical age. One can
That's
be
true.
spiritually very evolved irrespective of the physical age. And I have known people who are still materially clamoring,
You're a
spiritually young.
practical example, Guruji.
No, I don't intend in that sense, but I've been fortunate that there was this calling from a young age, though, but it doesn't, no, factually I'm saying the spiritual age and the physical age are not any measurement, but I like the way you said 70-30 and it's become 30-70, right? It's for one to find out how exactly that is. But it's important, there's a concept that you may drop 100 lower attachments, but you picked up one other attachment. So in terms of attachment, it's still the same. I've dropped 100 copper coins, but I've picked up a gold coin. In terms of value, that one gold coin is more than value of 100 silver coins or 100 copper coins. You see that? So that awareness is important.
Thank you, Guruji.
Somebody is just mentioning that, I'm not saying, somebody said that when you're a kid, you attach something else. Now you attach to a grandchild. That's what I think perhaps. So watch out. Okay.
Thank you, Guruji.
Right. Most welcome. Yes, Sitaramji. Could you unmute yourself?
Yeah,
now.
yeah, I've done that. You asked a question a little earlier about which are the places where one's stimuli is very minimal. Of course, ashram was mentioned. Isn't the sleep state also where your stimuli are a minimum?
Zero stimuli.
Yeah.
I went a little further ahead. In Smashanam also, there is no stimuli.
Yeah, so I'm saying that when you're dreaming, I would not say the stimuli are zero because you're dreaming, so something is happening. So there is a stimulus there.
No, sir, you could have had a sumptuous meal, and when you slept, you could be dreaming of having not had a proper meal for over a week, 10 days. Is it that possible? So the food in your stomach doesn't satisfy the hunger of the dreamer. You could be a wealthy and opulent man, and yet you could be a beggar begging on the streets for your day-to-day meeting your ends. Isn't that possible as a dreamer?
Absolutely.
So therefore, the thoughts of the dreamer, the efforts of the dreamer, the wealth of the dreamer doesn't make a waker any rich or any wise. So the dreamer stimuli is no taboo or no relevance or no reference to the waking state, because they are two independent realms of existence. So you don't spiritually evolve or devolve by what you do in the dream. But dreams, though, do convey what state of mind you are. Because a healthy mind has very few dreams. Huh?
Yeah.
That's another way of measuring how healthy your mind is.
Would they not also indicate your, say, unmanifested vasanas, what you dream?
No. They don't really talk of, see, the dream doesn't really talk of unmanifest vasana. The dream actually, in very simple words, dream is nothing but a vomiting of the undigested, unfulfilled, incomplete, unexperienced experiences of the waker. So if there's something which has been bothering you, wanting, and you haven't experienced it, take an example of you are an avid movie watcher. You would go to the theaters 2-3 times a month. In the past 7 months, you haven't had a chance. There's a very likelihood that you will be dreaming of watching movies. Why? Because the desire to watch a movie in a theater, you're not able to satisfy. So you will satisfy it in the dream. It's just a vomiting of unfulfilled experiences or desires.
But many a time the dreams that one gets are absolutely unconnected with what one has gone through.
Because there's so much of stimuli that is going into the... Okay, if I were to ask you, Sitaramji, you're watching a movie, okay? Or you're watching television, you're watching a cricket match, or you're watching some program, but in between, or you watch a movie or any program, there's so many thoughts that are thrown at you, isn't it?
Yeah.
The various scenes, the various locations, the various actors, the various roles, so much. You're just wanting to enjoy the comedy of the movie, but unknowingly, indirectly, so much of stimuli, so many thoughts and seeds are planted, because one movie is choreographed in a very beautiful setting in Austria, somewhere in Europe. And when you see that, say, hey, I remember going there, isn't it? And you tell your wife and say, hey, remember we were there many years ago? It has triggered an old memory in you. You see that? How you didn't have a thought of Austria, you didn't have a thought of New York, you didn't have a thought of anything else. But when you watch a movie, the Eiffel Tower gets planted into you. Madison Square gets planted into you. Buckingham Palace gets planted into you. Taj Mahal gets planted into you. So many thoughts are planted into you. What are you processing all of that? What would happen to all of those? We're unconscious. We don't even know. Perhaps you're not even aware until I mentioned this. Multifold thoughts get into the mind and get clogged up. And then what happens to all of them? Somewhere it has to go somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Yes, Sudhakar Garu.
I got a small question, Guruji.
Yes, please.
Is there any possibility that Vasana will wake you up all of a sudden and telling you, I am there with you, why don't you wake up? Has the Vasana got the capacity of waking you up and telling you that I am there with you, why don't you look at me?
Are you telling physical waking up or a spiritual waking up? I am not clear with the question.
For example, I never knew that I would sing. And for the last 72 years, I never sang in my life. And all of a sudden, this COVID times, has given me a possibility to sing. And many people are liking it. I don't tell everybody is liking it, but many people are liking it.
I am one of them. The other day, you
Thank you so much.
entertained us so beautifully, singing lovely old melodious songs. So we enjoyed that ride.
I go on telling the people, I never knew that. I too didn't know that I would sing.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, this has developed. And I started showing the interest in that.
Yeah.
So what I mean to say, I didn't know whether that Vasana, I had that Vasana or not. But that has woken me up, or I don't know exactly how.
No, it is not. I don't think the language is right to say that the Vasana has woken you up. In fact, you have come to the awareness of a hidden, unmanifest Vasana. It could have been the fact that you say that over the last 70 years, you have not known to have had a flair to sing. No doubt you would have appreciated a melodious music though. But here is an opportunity where you have been away from the things you would have normally done. And it gives you an opportunity where you have discovered certain hidden interests or talents or vasanas in you. Vasana is nothing but a liking or a talent for something or an inclination for something. In fact, what you have shared is a classic example that 72 years you did not know I have a vasana for singing, and now I am I can't keep quiet. That's what you're saying. I love singing now. I'm not just a bathroom singer. I'm doing all the time. I'm singing and I'm enjoying it. So this is exactly what we're saying. So there are, see, ideally you should analyze your own personality. If this analysis is not done, then perhaps you will have to verify it through experience.
Thank you.
Most welcome.
Thank
So look at this one word, Vishuddhatma. So much of discussion has happened. Shuddhatma, one who has cleansed his vasanas, no dirt at the causal body. The second, he says, Vijitatma, one who has conquered the self. Conquering the self refers to the subtle body, where the intellect has conquered the mind. All right, so it's at the subtle body level. Jitendriya, Indriya refers to one who has subdued, one who has conquered his senses, refers to the gross body. So here is a jnani, a man of perfection who has handled himself well at all levels of the personality. Vasanas are taken care of, the mind and intellect is addressed, the physical body and the sensual demands of all the senses are addressed. Now, that doesn't mean he doesn't operate. He would operate in the senses. Only thing is he's not tossed by them. He's not vulnerable to the sensual temptations. He has very much a perfect control. Now, if any one of us, this doubt may come, isn't it? I think I'm very close to a jnani. Enna Shivaji? அந்த தாட் வர முடியாதா? வரும் இல்லையா? அப்பப்போ may not be very often, very rarely the thought might come, I think I'm very close to a jnani. Yes, sir.
வரலாமோன்னு தான் கிளாஸ்ல வந்து உட்கார்ந்துருக்கோம். வருமோ வர பாசிபிலிட்டிக்கோ வாசனை இருக்கும் தெரிஞ்சுக்கிறது தான் கிளாஸ்.
Now, Moshmi, very sorry, I don't know whether you follow Tamil or not. Huh? You follow Tamil?
I can't. No, I don't know. Sorry.
Okay, Shiva, can you please tell what you said? Yes, sir. Romba uncharitable looking as a wow, she not able to follow anything.
No, we are just trying to check. We have the possibility to have that. That's why we come to the sessions, to know our vasanas and probably cross over.
Now, the question I'm asking is, how do we know whether we have reached that state of a jnani? Here, he doesn't take anything for granted. He says it, one who, what's the quality control of a jnani, of having reached that state? The quality control here says is, Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma, who realizes his self as the self in all beings. The moment you get to that state of realization or perfection or unfoldment of yourself, once you realize yourself, you see the same self reflecting in every being around you. And when you have that feeling of oneness, now what is the opposite of this oneness? What is the opposite of oneness? Ashama, boliye, what is the opposite of oneness? Don't say two-ness and three-ness.
Diverse.
What is diverse? What does diverse create? You're right. Duality. What does it create?
Differences. And you start comparing.
Okay, differences, you compare, and then what does it do to you? What does it do to you?
Probably it would give superiority complex or ego.
It gives an ego, a complex. It creates a conflict. It creates a friction. It creates disharmony, isn't it?
Yeah.
So When one reaches the state of the self, don't even, we are far, far from it. Don't even think you're anywhere near it. Let us be realistic. I'm being very sorry. North Pole, we are in South Pole. The two poles apart. The very, very high lofty state. Just because it's in a language which is palatable, it doesn't make someone close to it. It's a very, very elevated state. So the moment you have this feeling of seeing the self, seeing the oneness everywhere, there is no more otherness, there is no hatred. There is no differentiation, there is no otherness. So you don't have that animosity towards anyone or any being or any act or any thought of aversion doesn't exist in your heart. You become pure because you see yourself in that person. And yet no two people are the same, but yet you see the commonality there. There is no difference. Yes, Sitaramji.
My question is, Guruji, in this shloka, the chronology which is mentioned there, that is, first is you purify the self, then you conquer the self, then you subdue the senses, then of course you see yourself as part of everybody else. Is this a chronology, or should it be that you first conquer your senses, then you purify yourself, and then you conquer the self?
No, it
That's
is not.
my doubt.
It is not mentioned in that hierarchy.
It's not mentioned here.
It's not. It is not to be taken. He's only describing a state.
All right. Okay.
Because he's not giving us a path here. He's describing his state. And there is no specific order. If you really take an order, he's going from subtle to gross. Causal body, subtle body, gross body. He's just mentioning it. I think he's just not to be taken, not to be taken literally. Okay. Is it the same as being empathetic, putting oneself in other shoes? Yes, you can think that way. You feel for others, you identify with others, you go even beyond that, and you see yourself in them. You don't see an otherness. There's no separateness at all. It's like, we give this simple example, sometimes it does happen that your teeth bites the tongue, and yet sometimes you can bite it so hard that it starts profusely bleeding and becomes such a discomfort. You can't eat, you can't do anything. But since the tongue apparently has got the maximum number of muscles, so it heals very, very fast. Indeed, before you realize, the tongue heals. However deep a cut, amazing, Ascharya, it's a wonderment. How it happens is a wonderment, Ascharya. But when your teeth bite the tongue, do you blame the teeth or do you blame the tongue for having bit the tongue, or do you blame the tongue? Hey, stupid fellow, why did you come in between the teeth? You know there are two sharp teeth there, up one row, bottom one row. How can you go in between? You will be crushed. Na? Will you give a lecture to your tongue? Mind your tongue. Will you say your tongue, mind your tongue? What's going on? You will not say that, isn't it? Why? You understand both are me. So how can you blame either the tongue or the teeth? You understand. So you will instantly become one. There is no question of complaining there. You're one and the same. So when that identification is there, and where do you start with? Where do you start that feeling of oneness? Jai Shri Ma, where do you start? We all have to start somewhere, isn't it? As I've said, this is the goal. Where do you start that feeling of oneness? I'm afraid we can't hear you, ma. Unable to hear you.
More on that.
No, I'm sorry. I don't think you're audible. Maybe if you could, if you have something to say, please use the chat box. You can convey your thoughts. I thought to connect with you, but never mind. Yeah, Moshmima, can you tell me where do you start implementing this quality of seeing oneness? Can't hear you. Huh? No, we still can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself. Now
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I think if I can feel this way that I am just an awareness or consciousness, and so is the other person. If I can focus myself on the other person as just being a bundle of consciousness and nothing beyond that, then possibly it is possible to identify or feel the oneness in the true sense.
Do you like cockroaches?
Like?
Ah.
I'm indifferent to them. I mean, I know that they create a lot of trouble at home, so occasional pest control has to be done.
With a lot of love you do them. You do pest control with a lot of love.
No.
Because you see the same consciousness in the cockroach also, no?
Yes, I do see. At the same time, I feel it's a functional requirement also.
But please limit that functional requirement to cockroaches. Other beings should live, isn't it? They have right to live.
Of course.
Anjay, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Now, where do you, my question is, even to be able to see that level of awareness is a very high level, Moshmima. What I'm saying is to be, as I've said, where there is oneness, there is no otherness, there is no hatred. I'm sure that in your heart, there is certain elements of otherness to certain sections of a society, or it could be religion based, it could be a faction of a society, it could be any reason, it could be a member of your extended family, it could be neighbor, it could be anyone out there. Is it not possible?
Yeah, that is possible.
That's possible. It's being very realistic. I'm just being very practical. So my question is, where do I start practicing this level of oneness?
Yeah, I feel that if I can do volunteer, I mean, in some helping the people, personally, we do sort of emotional support to the people who are needy. So when I'm able to walk in his or her shoes and feel his status, his state of mind, his thoughts and feelings and the situation from his point of view, I am actually being able to identify to some extent, and this is voluntary work. So really I'm not doing for any self gain in that sense, but if I say that I gain some satisfaction, that is also true. I mean, when I feel that I really can touch the heart or make some difference to the mind of the needy person in some way, that gives me some satisfaction in a way, which again becomes my self gain or not a true giving maybe. But I feel like that I can empathize with mostly with the needy when I perceive that the person is needy and I can make some difference to his or her life.
Wonderful.
Either through emotional support or even, I mean, very rarely through physical or monetary support, but mostly through emotional support.
I get what you're saying clearly, but what I was coming to is where there is a difference of opinion, where where you have a certain negative feeling towards someone. It could be your own family member, it could be your colleague at work, or it could be, you may have a certain averse feeling the moment I mention of a particular religion or a caste or from a particular country. You can have a certain aversion. So how do you handle that, Mike? So how you should approach is, you find out what is the area of your weakness first. So your spiritual growth, your ability to see the self, starts with where you're not able to see. So, and each one has an area which is challenging. It could be, as I've said, it could be anything. It could be a neighbor, it could be a mother-in-law, it could be your sibling. It could be someone out there where you have a hatred, you have something bothering you, you have an animosity. That is your area of spiritual growth, starts there. And then you grow from there beyond it. Your growth always happens in areas of your weakness. So start with areas of weakness, never start with areas of a strength. Areas of strength, you're already strong. What is there to work on? Work on your areas of weakness. So you want to see the self. What is the highest of it? The highest of it, Harishji, what is the highest thought? The self, the highest is, the self is the same in a sinner and a saint. Can you see the Atman, or that awareness or consciousness, in a saint and a sinner? That you got to be, that is what he's saying. Who realizes himself as a self in all beings. So irrespective what the world gives you, it could be an act of sin or an act of saintliness, you see the same self everywhere. That shows how high have you evolved. Here we are not talking about giving into a particular area of identification. Like you spoke about, Moshmi spoke about, you have a feeling where you want to be of doing emotional service. Annapurnama is talking about feeding the poor, or someone who needs some kind of physical service. We're not talking of areas where you have a feeling. We're talking of areas where you don't have a feeling. Yes, Sitaramji.
One place where I get the sense of being one with the others is when you go outdoors and you see the majesty of the nature, like the foothills of the Himalayas or the forests and these beautiful creations of God. When you feel yourself to be so small, or when you're looking at the stars, when you look yourself, you find yourself to be so small, and then you realize that that you must be part of everything else, and which somebody else has created. That's one place where one feels comes closest to, I think, I'm talking myself, of feeling that one is a part of the entire universe, and we are all part of the same self.
So in effect, you are saying it's easier to identify with the totality, with God or with the divinity in the best of things.
Yeah.
Example, nature or something which is pristine or grand or majestic. You're able to instantly attune to a certain feeling. But when that same grandness diminishes,
that's a problem.
What happens? What happens then?
Yeah, you see only differences.
Sir,
that is the problem.
This morning Rajima actually had sent me a beautiful flower, a picture of a flower. And when I looked at it, I said, looked at the picture rather, I said, wow, what a beautiful flower. It wasn't from the garden, is it? Yeah. Now, it could be a very rare flower. It's a very beautiful flower. Now, you can pick an ordinary flower from your own garden. Do you feel the same presence of divinity in it? Not a rare, majestic flower, just an ordinary flower, which you would use the same flower to offer to the Lord every day, perhaps. It's an abundance, actually. It just grows and grows and grows. See, where there's a fall of that level of wonderment.
Yeah.
You know, I'm saying this because you brought this concept and we all fit in somewhere that ladder. The ladder we're talking about is your spiritual development. We're all somewhere between 0 and 100. Spiritual development, 0. All of us somewhere in between this. Your spiritual development and the capacity to attune to God, the triggering factor, is inversely proportional. Are you all following? The spiritual development vis-a-vis the capacity to attune to God are inversely proportional. Which means, let's say I am 10% spiritually developed. I need 90% of the world to trigger a certain divine feeling in me, which is, I have to go to Tirupati Balaji, I have to go to Mecca, or I have to go to the Vatican just to have that extraordinary divine feeling. Oh, that place is very, very divine. I've myself perhaps gone hundreds of times in my life. And I undoubtedly agree with all of those people who say that that place has something extraordinary calling. It has some power. It has some divine feeling. Certainly. But when a person, let's say, has evolved from 10% to 60% spiritually evolved, his requirement to attune to God drops from 90% to 40%. Means he doesn't need to go to Tirupati Balaji or the Vatican or Mecca to feel spiritual. He can take a walk to a temple down the street. There's a temple there. In fact, the same temple. In fact, the other day somebody was talking of the Chilkur Balaji temple. There's a Chilkur Balaji temple in the outskirts of our city, isn't it? Now, when I visit the same Balaji temple, it's not that this Chilkur Balaji is a different Balaji, Tirupati Balaji is a different Balaji. No, the same Balaji. The same rituals are performed, the same thoughts are invoked, the same divine feelings are there. But when you go to that temple, does it arouse the same divine feeling as you get when you go to Lord Balaji in Tirupati? I see a few heads like the Kondapalli Bommal, no? They are nodding in different ways, so I am not able to understand what to make sense of it. Huh? You figure it out. I'm not sitting here in trying to make a judgment. I'm just giving a concept. Please don't misunderstand me. If I'm able to have that same divine feeling going to Chilkur Balaji, it may be an hour or an hour and a half drive, which you may not do every other day. But when you do so, you have a special feeling. There could be Balaji temple. You have created the same altar. You have a puja room in your house. You have picked up that altar from Tirupati. You brought it. You've got that frame nicely done. Light, whatever lighting, everything you have set up. When you look at that same Lord Balaji, the portrait of Balaji, what feeling does it arouse? Does it have the same spiritual arousing as if you are standing in front of the Lord? You have booked a special darshan for yourself. You have taken a lot of effort. You've planned in advance and you've got that special darshan where you have that experience of spending a few more minutes. So you're just soaking in that atmosphere, that Lord's presence. Do you have that same feeling when you look at a portrait of Balaji, which is there right in your house? Every house would have it. Which has to be, you are at 90% developed, that you only need that less a trigger to attune to God. Now, what I'm only saying is, the same divinity has created the mighty Himalayas, the mighty Niagara Falls. The same divinity is present in a sunrise or a sunset. The same divinity is there in a flower blooming. The same divinity is there in every aspect of life. But in order to attune to it, you must be truly spiritual. If you are not, you limit that presence of divinity to certain pockets of expressions. God is not confined to a temple, church, or a mosque only, please. How can I limit the presence of God to the parameters of this sanctum sanctorum? Who am I? Am I that grand that I am locking up God and waking up God and putting him to sleep? It's only symbolic, isn't it? What would happen if God were go to sleep? Siddharamanji, let's say you have not chanted the Suprabhatam in the morning and God slept for a little longer because you slept little longer and you did not chant Suprabhatam. What will happen to all of us, sir?
Nothing.
Will perish.
How do you say that, sir?
He is the force behind.
No, if you don't wake him up, what will happen?
It's a very tricky question, huh? So think twice before you answer. Either way, you will be caught with the answer. What would happen if you don't?
He is very much in me. Atman, Brahman.
I can see the influence of Ramana Maharshi on you. Huh? The great Ramanaji is there. I can see it. I can sense it. Now, what is the symbolism behind singing or chanting the Suprabhatam?
Waking up the God within you.
Waking ourselves.
Waking up the God within you. Waking up to the divinity in an auspicious hour. So the Brahma Muhurtam, the auspicious hour of the time or the day, where you invoke the thoughts of the higher in you. So it's not to wake up God, is to wake yourself up to God. If only God were to switch off even for a split second. Imagine there is this live session going on and for some reason the main power supply, including the inverter, has conked. What would happen to this webinar that's going on?
Close the session.
Samapt. The end. You're all wondering what happened. And I also wonder what happened. Suddenly the whole thing has come to a halt. That is God. You know what? One of the best descriptions of God. One of the best descriptions of God. Harishji, if you can type it verbatim, please. One of the best descriptions is, with it, everything happens. With it, everything happens. Without it, nothing happens. Yet, it has got nothing to do with the happening. With it, everything happens. Without it, nothing happens. Yet it has got nothing to do with the happening. That is Brahman. That is God. That is the self. And you get an impression of what that is when we get on to the next, from the 8th verse. He talks about a man who's attained that state of enlightenment. How does he behave? What happens? He says, I do nothing at all. I'm not doing anything. In spite of many things happening, I do many things. In spite of saying that, he says, I do nothing at all. So we will come to that when we get to that. Perhaps next week when we come, we'll get on to that. But just concluding on the thoughts of what we said a little earlier, that spiritual development vis-a-vis the capacity to attune to God are inversely proportional. So the more spiritual you are, you don't need an elaborate, an extravagant display to attune to God. You don't have to do anything grand or majestic to feel spiritual. Even in the mere routine things, you see divinity. Padminima, are you following? But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything. You may have to do whatever you feel appropriate to do it. But as long as you realize that God is there, not only in the best, God is there even in the worst of things. God is everywhere. So don't limit God to the best. But then why is it easier to find God in the best of things? Why is it easier to find God in the best of things? Yes, Annapurnama.
It is easy to identify the self with all good things because we try to project ourselves as nature of human beings to project oneself as a very good, very goody picture. But I had this doubt, to see the self in all beings. It is little difficult. In good things, yes, it's very easy to identify with. But if I see a sinner, somebody taking money, or some thief, how can I get only the thought that if my self is the same as his, then I wouldn't be doing that act.
No,
So it is difficult to identify. See the same self in all beings. It is easy to see it in good things, but not in contrast things to your nature.
This is the question, isn't it? In fact, I have put it very hardly. You put very sweetly. That's about all. Romba sweetly, நீங்க rephrase பண்ணி question திருப்பி you clarified the question. But this is the challenge, not just to you. That is the spiritual sadhana. As I've said, the spiritual sadhana starts with where you don't identify. It's not where you can identify. It's where you don't identify, start seeing God there. And all of us have an area where we are being challenged. Find that out. Explore that. And decodify it. Unwind it. What is it that you are hating? Remember this famous phrase, which it will resonate very well. Whenever there is something that doesn't resonate well with you, remember, you start with hating the sin, but not the sinner.
Oh, yes.
Isn't it? Now you get it. So how do you start practicing the same self is, okay, I know there's something wrong. He's a thief. Maybe he's desperate to make a living. You know the famous movie Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. You must all watch it. In this times, this is a classic movie by Victor Hugo. The whole movie revolves around an honest woodcutter, but he was deprived of opportunities and he had to feed his family. And he becomes desperate and he goes and he steals a loaf of bread and he's caught stealing that bread and he's imprisoned. The short and long of story is he's imprisoned for 30 years and he escapes, and then the rest of the story goes how that one act he did changed his whole course of life, and then certain instances happened and how his whole life changed. But if you do come across people who are emotional, who don't bring the best out of them, how do you look at them? You don't have to hate the person. There's every reason for us to hate that quality, but don't hate the personality. The quality is not the personality. In fact, when a man was jailed, imprisoned, because he got into drugs, he got arrested and he was imprisoned. When he was returning from jail, his mother went to receive him from the prison with open heart, with open arms, receiving the son, because she couldn't contain her joy. She wanted to meet her son. Does she hate the son because he has done such an act of taking drugs and spent 10 years in imprisonment. And he's not only tarnished his image, tarnished the whole image of the family. No, but she didn't allow that act to hate the child. She had still love for the child. She went to receive him from the prison. Hate the sin, not the sinner. So if you're able to separate the qualities, even, Sitaramji, you mentioned earlier, we have discussed on that, even when you seem to like or able to identify with the goodness, you're not identifying with the Atman, you're only identifying with the quality. When somebody talks good to you, you like that person. Oh, it's so divine in him, it's so nice. Somebody challenges your ego, you may not necessarily appreciate what his inputs are. You may have a little tug of views with him. And you say, okay, I respect your view, but I don't necessarily agree with you. You may part ways with a disagreement, but there is no a positive feeling. Not necessarily there's a hatred, but there's no positive feeling out of it. So when you say you like a person, you feel good about something, are you truly identifying with God? I don't think so. We are still caught up in the gunas. Remember, you're still caught up in the gunas, you're still caught up in the qualities, you're still caught up in the vestures or the layers which cover the self. The self is inside, and around that the various vestures or layers known as koshas. So you're just caught up in the various layers, the qualities, whether sattva, rajas, tamas. If the sattvic quality is there, you are able to identify the sattvic quality. The divinity is seen through a sattvic person more, but you're still identifying with the guna, not with the self. If you're able to identify, you will be able to identify everywhere. So I'm only trying to clarify that we are only identifying with the qualities. To be able to identify with the self, it's a very high exalted state. I can't say that, oh, I'm able to see the self in Sitaramji, but I can't see self in Rajima. That statement, something seriously wrong. If at all I can see the self in Sitaramji, I should be able to see the self in everyone. That is the quality control, he says. He who sees a self in every being. If you can't say, I see self in pockets, that is not the self, my dear. You are seeing something other than it. What? Some qualities you identify. We need to get clarity in that perception. So we need to see the clarity in that and then understand what these men are talking about. These people rise beyond the gunas. They go beyond that and see the self, which is the same in a sinner and a saint. It is the same. Truly an exalted state, a state where you and I should aspire for. Okay. Hariji, I think we have just overshot the time. We will, if you don't mind, we can come back to it later on. All right. I think you had raised your arm to clarify something. If we can, did you? Okay. I think we will come back to it. Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.